Hello, yeah, I'm Leigh Russell, as you can see on the rather splendid poster behind me that my publisher produced. Um, I'm best known, I think, for my Geraldine Steele series of crime thrillers, and I've been writing those for about 10 or 12 years now. And the 15th book in the series, called Evil Impulse, is published in January 2021. And I've written the 16th one has been edited, is coming out next year. I've finished the 17th one, that's gone away for editing. Recently signed a contract with my publisher, No Exit Press, for book 17 to 20. So the series is going to run, hopefully, if we get that far, to 20 books, which is what I always had in mind when I started. I don't know why. I think I'd read the Cadfael series and I thought, oh, 20 books, that's pretty impressive. That'll be good. So I thought I'll do 20 books for Geraldine Steele. So still going strong with Geraldine Steele. I've also written quite a few other things since I began writing. But I think, as I say, I'm best known probably for the Geraldine Steele series. Did you want me to carry on? I mean, I can keep talking endlessly, or you can interrupt me.
No, that's fine. So before we went live today, I was reading the Lucy Hall series. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Lucy Hall series came about kind of by chance. My husband was working in Seychelles when he was a very young man. And while he was there in the late 1970s, there was a political coup. And he told me all sorts of stories about what went on. And as a writer, I just thought, wow, these stories are amazing. So I'll just give you one example. The people who took over, the regime who took over, they were handing out guns left, right, and centre. And there were all these young men who were completely untrained, just being given guns. So it was quite a frightening time. And so the manager of the hotel where my husband was working phoned him up and said, don't leave the hotel. There's a 24-hour curfew. As an expat, you're really at risk. Just stay in your house. Don't leave. And the manager said, just last night, someone was shot and killed down on the beach in Beauvalon Bay. And my husband said, wow, these locals are really hot under the collar about their politics, aren't they? Shooting each other. And the hotel manager said, oh, no, that was nothing to do with politics. They were just having a row over a lobster pod. And so that little anecdote comes up in the book that I wrote. And a lot of the anecdotes about what went on at that time are actually things that my husband told me that really happened. So I had all these stories. So I wrote a book, and basically a young man working in Seychelles in the late 70s returns 30 years later with his wife and daughter. And then something that happened to him while he was there as a young man rears its ugly head. My husband assures me that he did not get up to what the character in the book got up to when he was a young man. But well, that's really where the germ of the idea came from. And I mean, it was great because we did have to take a trip to Seychelles for research, and hard job, somebody has to do it. But what I'd been told firsthand about Seychelles was from 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and places change. And actually, when we went back, my husband said it had changed quite a lot. There was a lot more security everywhere. And plus, there's things that you really need to be in a place to appreciate. What colour really is the sand? What does it sound like in the cloud forest? And I also had to research police procedures in Seychelles, which are very different to how they are here. And so we spent a lot of time in the police headquarters in the capital, Victoria. Spent time in the local police station in Beauvalon Bay. And it was all really interesting. It was great fun. And in fact, the Minister for Culture and Tourism from Seychelles flew over to London for the London launch of the book, because they were all very excited that, an author from England has come over to write a book set in Seychelles. So that was the first in this series. My agent found me a publisher for that book, but the publisher wanted a multiple book deal. And so we ended up signing a 3-book deal. And so Lucy Hall then became the heroine of a trilogy, a kind of investigative journalist. And so the second book was set a bit closer to home, because the only drawback with going to Seychelles for a trip, which was absolutely fabulous, such a beautiful place, we were there for 2 weeks, but whatever I needed to find out, I had to find out while I was there, because if I'd forgotten about something or missed something out, we couldn't just pop back and have a look. So the second book is set in Paris, and we went and stayed in Le Marais district, which is absolutely beautiful, wonderful place. We stayed there for a couple of weeks getting the feel of it, and I did actually have to pop back a few months later to check something, but that's fine because Paris is accessible. The third book in the series is set in Rome, and we have friends living in Paris, we have friends living in Rome, and we actually went to stay with a friend just outside Rome in Ostia Antigua. So that was great. My husband loved it because he's a great traveller. He would be off travelling every day of the week if he could. I'm not a traveller. I like being at home. But for the purpose of my research, I went out and about, and so we did quite a lot of travelling. So it was a very interesting series, but quite tiring.
Samantha has said the Seychelles sound lovely. If you could live anywhere while you wrote a book set there, would you go back there or choose somewhere else?
It's pretty hot there. It's absolutely beautiful. It is like an idyllic island. It is absolutely beautiful, but I think it would be a bit too hot for me. I mean, I know it sounds a bit lame, but I like my home. I like being at home. So if I could choose where I would live right here where I am. I mean, we're fortunate because we do have a garden, so which Michael spends a lot of time in. It's a lovely garden, not large garden, but very pretty. And if I could, the only other thing I would say is if I could live anywhere, I think when I was at university, I lived by the sea and I love the sea. So possibly in an ideal world, I would live here where I am in London, in my home, but I'd also have a little, weekend retreat by the sea somewhere and go and look at the sea sometimes.
Have you ever been tempted to set a book in London?
Well, actually, part of the Geraldine Steele series is set in London. My detective Geraldine starts in Kent, and she has her first 3 books are set in Kent, starting with Cut Short. The reason I chose Kent was because when I started writing, there were no creative writing courses there. Nobody told me what to do. I just made it all up, which I still do. And I've since discovered that if you set a book in a real place, then it gives you a bit of an advantage in terms of sales, because you can make contacts with local bookshops, local libraries when they're open, and people who live there love having a book set where they live. But I didn't know that at the time. I just found an empty space in the map in Kent and made up a town there. So once the first book, Cut Short, came out, I couldn't make contact with local libraries, local bookshops, because they didn't exist, because the town was just an invention. Geraldine is in Kent for 3 books, and she then moves as a career move to London. And she's in London for 3 or 4 books. In the meantime, while she was in Kent, she was working with a young Sergeant, Ian Peterson. And when Geraldine moves to London, she leaves him behind in Kent. Ian Peterson had become quite a popular character in his own right and had quite a following. So I then wrote a trilogy for Ian Peterson, and he starts in Kent, where Geraldine left him, and he then moves to York, partly because he wants to get away from his in-laws. And that got a bit complicated because the 2 of them kept in touch. So Ian has a cameo appearance in each of Geraldine's books, and Geraldine had a cameo appearance in each of his books. And so they're kind of running concurrently. It then got to a point in the story where Geraldine had to leave London for reasons that I won't divulge. But if you read through the series, you'll find out. So then I was thinking, well, where can I move her to? And the obvious answer was move her to York and reunite her with Ian Peterson. So there's a really nice kind of symmetry to it, which I'd like to say was all carefully planned and thought out in advance, but it wasn't at all. It just kind of evolved. So Geraldine and Ian are now both working together again in York. So yes, there were a few books set in London, and I set them in North London, which I know because I live somewhere around there. And that made research quite easy because I could just go and look at places and walk around and get the feel of places. We do go to York for a couple of weeks every year. Not able to at the moment, of course. So there's a bit more making things up. But it's very helpful to actually go to a place and see things and view things in relation to each other. And you can look up online and think, oh, that bit of woods looks like it might be a good place to leave a dead body if you're trying to hide it away. But when you actually go there, you look at it and you think, oh, actually, no, there's blocks of flats all around and people would see you. So it's helpful to actually go to places. But setting books in London did help because I could just hop on the tube and go anywhere. But places don't really inspire me, although I have set a lot of books in inspiring places like Seychelles, like Rome, Paris. York is a really atmospheric, fabulous place. But it's people who inspire me really, and what they get up to, what are they doing, why are they doing it. So
I think you can tell that in your books because the characters are really well developed and they develop over the series. Do you keep like a sort of list of details about all of them?
I have a very good editor who remembers everything. I do a little bit, and of course it does help having my my manuscripts online because I can look things up. But yes, I mean, when I started out, I have it all in my head. I don't need to write things down. But after a while, yes, I did need to start thinking, hang on, wait a minute, when did this happen? And has this already happened? And so, yes, I'm not terribly organized, as you probably realize. So with each book, I just keep a list of the characters, you know, suspects, victims, murderer, detectives. But I don't keep detailed notes. You do have to be careful. You need consistency throughout the books because readers will remember. You can't have a character who drinks, you know, beer in one book, doesn't like wine, and in the next book is quaffing loads of wine or whatever. Or coffee, doesn't like coffee in one book and then drinks lots of coffee. But as I say, I have a really eagle-eyed editor, and she will pick me up if I do make any gaffes. But I pretty much, it's a very strange phenomenon, actually. I find it very weird. When I'm writing a book, I pretty much sort of have it all in my head. But once I've finished, it kind of goes, and then the next book is in my head. But of course, Geraldine and Ian Peterson, they are series characters. They continue through the series. So yes, I like to think they develop, as you say, and things happen to them. But they are the same character, basically.
The Lucy Hall ones felt very different because I've read Ian Peterson, Geraldine, and Lucy Hall now. That one felt really different. What gives you the inspiration for the stories?
Sometimes it's important for me to write different things. I have written a couple of standalone thrillers, and they were very different again because they're written in the first person. In my other books, in Lucy Hall and in the Geraldine books, the crime books, they're written from different points of view. So, I mean, just for Geraldine Steele or for Lucy Hall, they're mainly written from the protagonist's point of view, but you do also get the criminal's viewpoint or a victim's viewpoint. And that is a bit of a gift for a writer because I can tell readers things that my protagonist doesn't know. And then it becomes exploiting almost like that kind of pantomime thing of he's behind you, no, he isn't, yes, he is. Because let's say Geraldine Steele or Lucy Hall, they can be going somewhere and the reader knows what's waiting for them there, but they don't know. So you can really heighten the tension in that way. The standalone thrillers that I've written, The Adulterer's Wife, which is such a great title, I love it, and Suspicion, are written in the first person. And that's very different, because there the reader only knows, and I only know really, what the main character knows. And so there's a different kind of dynamic there. And in some ways, it's a lot easier to write, because I mean, with other books, I have to remember who's doing what on a particular day, and what does this one know about, what does that one know about. Whereas writing in the first person, it's just that viewpoint. That's simple. I've also written a historical novel, which is going to be published, but not out yet. And the other thing I've been busy with at the moment, and okay, this has only happened since lockdown, so go figure. I've started writing some dystopian novels, and the first of those is going to be published in April. But they're also written in first person, and the readers only know the viewpoint of the narrator. So all very different. So I've written crime novels. That's my main thing, crime novels. But I've also written standalone psychological thrillers. I've written dystopian novels, and I've written a historical novel. I have also written a humorous novel, which I think will never see the light of day, which is probably a good thing. I'm quite obsessive about writing. I'm always writing, but sometimes I need a break. I can't just write murder stories all the time. Sometimes I need to take a break from it, and then I will write something different. And actually, while I'm not writing crime, I find I'm starting to read some crime novels, whereas normally I don't read crime novels. I read other things while I'm writing crime. So I think it's I need the sort of the variety somehow, which I think we do as readers, don't we? We don't always read the same author and the same type of book. It's sometimes fun to shake it up a bit.
But are you going to publish the dystopian novel as Leigh Russell?
Yeah. So you will be able to find it, and then I think quite a few people are probably going to read it and say, "What's going on here? This isn't crime. Where's Geraldine Steele?" But yeah, I mean,
I'm excited. I love a dystopian novel. Does it have a title?
I'm not sure. It's sort of work in progress at the moment. But I'll tell you what, when we fix the title, I will let you know. You will be the first to know. I'll let you know. I'm going to make a note, and you will be the first to know. Yeah.
Samantha said, should people be worried about how many authors wander around looking for places to bury bodies? I think we should probably.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually the difficulty. I mean, if you think about it, okay, let's just, this is purely hypothetical, fictional speculation. Let's say you want to kill somebody. We're just imagining we're a killer. Actually killing somebody is probably not that difficult, is it? If you think about it, you just pick up a knife and you stab them or whatever. If you can get hold of a gun, you can just shoot them. You can put a pillow over their head. I mean, there are many ways to kill somebody. It's not that difficult. What do you do with the body, though? And when you're writing a crime novel, you have to start with a murder, but then it has to take a whole book before the police actually find out who the murderer is. Now, in real life, thank goodness, most murders are solved almost immediately. They tend to be people who kill people that they know, and the police will find the murderer fairly quickly. If you kill somebody in your front room, well, it's pretty obvious you had something to do with it, or somebody in your house had something to do with it. So in fiction, the murderer has to move the body to somewhere where it can't in any way be linked to the killer. And of course, nowadays with forensic science being so advanced, that's almost impossible, because you cannot go anywhere or do anything without leaving a DNA trace. So part of the challenge really of writing a crime novel nowadays is to find a way of making it plausible that somebody can kill somebody, and the police, who can't seem to be completely stupid, actually take a whole book to trace who the killer is.
Do you have do you have experts that you talk to for like forensic help and police procedures?
Yes, and I try to keep abreast of forensics because there are new and quite exciting discoveries and advances coming out all the time, and they can help to give you an idea for, oh, okay, yeah, that's how the police are going to find this killer, because there's this new thing that they can do. So yeah, but it does make it quite challenging. You know, mobile. How many times can you have a mobile phone where the battery goes dead just at the time when the killer's coming into the house? You know, how many times can you have a killer who doesn't leave any DNA behind them? It's quite a challenge. It's fun. It's part of the challenge of writing a crime novel.
Dawn Knight wants to know if you were writing while you were still teaching.
Yes.
And if so, how did you find the time?
How indeed. Yeah, very difficult. I was writing while I was still teaching, and you know when you're reading a book and sometimes you get so into it that you just can't put it down, and it's almost kind of painful to leave it to go and do something else. Well, I find, and I don't know how other writers experience this, but I find that I can actually click in and out of writing quite easily. And I think I sort of trained myself to do that, because when I was teaching, if I had a spare 5 minutes at break time, I would do a bit of writing, but then the class comes in, you have to stop. So I was able to go in and out of it quite quickly. But yeah, it was difficult, and I actually got very little sleep. And it got to the point when I was really riding two horses, because the books had started to take off. I was writing Geraldine Steele and Ian Peterson, delivering 2 manuscripts a year and teaching, and something had to go. And by that point, I just discovered a real passion for writing, and I'd been really passionate about teaching for a long time. And I think I'm just the sort of person who's a bit all or nothing. And so I just felt, okay, I really want to be writing now. So I stopped teaching, which was a bit of a jump, because as a teacher, every month, end of the month, your salary comes in or whatever. I had pneumonia very severely at one point, and I was in hospital for 2 weeks, and I was off work for 3 months. A month of which was school holidays, but 2 months was during term time. And I'd been in the school by that point for about 20 years. They knew I wasn't, being idle or anything. But while I was ill, every month salary came in. Fantastic. Once you're a writer, it's a very precarious existence. If people are buying your books, you get your royalties. But if the books stop selling, that's it. You have no money coming in. So it was quite a leap of faith, really, to give up the regular income and just go with the writing. But sometimes in life, you just have to go with it, don't you? You just have to hope for the best. I mean, at the end of the day, that's all any of us can do, really, isn't it? Just keep going and hope for the best. And so far, it's been going okay. So
you still keep your teaching hand in with some university stuff, though, don't you?
Yes, I have. I've gone back recently. I've become a Royal Literary Fellow, which means that a couple of days a week I do a few hours supporting university students, undergraduates, postgraduates, with their writing skills. And I'm happy to do that because I've got so much teaching experience. I was an English teacher. I'm trained to teach overseas students in other languages. I've got a diploma teaching students who've got specific learning difficulties. So I have those skills, and I'm a writer. And the Royal Literary Fellowship is for writers. So it all kind of comes together. So yes, I'm very happy to do that. I mean, I also I chair the Crime Writers Association Debut Dagger Award, which is a wonderful thing to do, supporting aspiring writers, and I coordinate their critiquing service as well. So yes, I do kind of keep my hand in trying to support other people, but my main focus now is writing, not teaching.
So there's quite a few questions come in. Samantha wants to know if there's a favourite relationship that you've created.
Yes, I guess it would have to be Geraldine and Ian, because that's been going on for so long, and it's a challenge kind of finding ways to keep it interesting, really, because they've been together for a long time now, and they had their breakups, and they've had, you know, other people coming in between them. I think probably they're just going to carry on an even keel now, but who knows? I mean, I never really quite know where I'm going with all this. It just depends, and I quite like that, because it's fun for me that, oh my goodness, this is happening to them, or that's happening to them. I mean, I know it all comes out of my head really, but I never quite know what's going to happen next. So, but I think, yeah, the favourite relationship would be Geraldine and Ian Peterson, just because they've stuck around with me for so long.
Jason wants to know if you've got any more standalone psychological thrillers planned.
Well, I think, like I've said, I don't really kind of plan. I never planned to write a standalone psychological thriller, but I just had an idea. And I do think, to some extent, as a writer, we don't go looking for stories. I think the stories find us. And I might say to you today, no, I'm not planning any more psychological thrillers. And then as soon as we finish our chat here, I might say, oh, I've got an idea. And there's another book. So I know it sounds like a cop-out. Honestly, it's not. I don't know. I never intended to write a historical novel. I never intended to write a dystopian novel. Dystopian novels are not particularly my cup of tea. I don't know where they came from, except that, as I say, we're in lockdown, go figure. But so I kind of think I probably will. And now that Jason has asked about it, I might be more inclined to, because I think, okay, I'll have one reader anyway, hopefully, unless he was thinking, I'll never want to read one of those again. So I don't know. I don't know. It's a great question, and I don't know.
How much plotting do you do for a book then? So once you've got the idea, do you plot it out in advance? Do you just make it up as you go?
I make it up as I go along. I wish I could plot in advance. It would make my life so much easier. Because I do sometimes get to a point and I think, oh no, what's going to happen now? But for me, that's part of the fun of it and part of the challenge. I quite like, I mean, one of the things I really enjoyed with the Lucy Hall series, because Lucy was not a police officer, I was a lot freer to do anything I wanted, and she could do the most idiotic things, because she's quite young and she's not a police officer, as I say. And I quite liked getting it into situations that were impossible to get out of, and then finding a way to get her out of them. That was fun. And no, the plots sort of evolve as I go along, but I do start with a killer, and I know what the killer's motivation is. I know why the killer has killed somebody. And then sometimes it's a little bit like, you know, Macbeth, Shakespeare's Macbeth, and Macbeth kills the king, doesn't he? He kills Duncan. But then he's worried. I mean, it's partly because the witches put him up to it, but he's also, I think, a little bit worried that Banquo might suspect him, so he has to kill Banquo. You know, every step leads on to something else, until he says he's in blood so far, stepped in to return, whereas tedious as go on. He reaches a point of no return, really. Well, really, when he kills the king. But it's a little bit like that. Sometimes, when one of the books I've written recently, my killer actually kills somebody unintentionally, but then he panics, gets rid of the body, and then somebody's seen him. So then, is he going to kill the witness? And then, you know, one thing leads to another. And he hadn't planned it like that. I hadn't planned it like that. But it was just an idea that I explored and kept going with it. So a lot of it is the what if. You know, somebody does something. What if then this happens? What would they do? And then on I go. I make it up as I go along. And so far, touch wood, it seems to sort of work out. And I'm not quite sure how. But I think a lot of writing goes on subconsciously. And I think I'll suddenly have an idea and think, oh, yeah, I could do this. But I wonder if that idea has been sort of somewhere in my head for a while, and then it just comes out when I'm writing. I think writing is the conscious expression of ideas that are mulling around in the back of your head. I don't really know how the process works. I don't really want to know. I mean, I've never done a creative writing course. I have taught creative writing, but to some extent, I don't want to analyse in too much detail how to write a book, because then I think the magic might go and it wouldn't be as much fun. You know, it's just a very organic, creative thing. And also there's that kind of terror every time. What if it doesn't work? Particularly with books that I'm contracted to write. I mean, one of the things that was fun about the psychological thrillers was that I was not under any contract with a publisher. I just wrote them and I didn't know if they would get published or not. So it was just fun. Whereas Geraldine Steele, I know there's a readership out there waiting for them. I know I have to deliver a manuscript by a certain date. And every time I'll get to the middle of the book, and I mean, a lot of authors will tell you this, and just panic and think, how is this going to work out? How am I going to get to the end of it? What am I doing? I have to deliver the manuscript by a certain day. But somehow it always seems to work out. I don't know how. And I get to the end of the book on a wing and a prayer sometimes.
So like Geraldine and Ian have kind of got to a certain point in their career when we joined them. And Lucy's quite maybe like a turning point in her life, like things have finished for her and she's sort of finding her feet. Does she, by the end of the series, has she found a niche for herself?
Well, read the rest of the books and you'll find out.
I'm going to have to.
I think she does develop a little bit. She grows through her experiences, as we all do. And I think because she's experiencing quite a lot in her life, she does develop quite a lot. But I think there's still room for more development. I mean, I say that was a trilogy, and I don't think I'm going to write any more of those. That was a while ago. But I think Geraldine has developed more because the series has gone on for longer. But I think you have to have some development in the character. I mean, if things are too static, it would just get boring, wouldn't it? It would be like writing the same book again and again.
There's a question further up the stream that said, would you write about the early days of Geraldine?
Oh, I've just realised I can see the questions here, can't I?
Yeah.
What was the question? Would I do a prequel?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know really. I'm not sure. It's quite tricky to think back. I mean, I'd have to think myself back to a time when I was alive and would be able to remember it, but I can't remember it that well. And I think that's quite difficult. I mean, writing a historical novel, I've written a book which is set in the 16th century, and there's a lot of research, absolutely fascinating. But somebody, I think it was Linda Stratman, said, you can't get out of date with a historical novel. You can't kind of get it wrong. If something happened in the 16th century, it happened then, and that's it. Whereas if I was writing about Geraldine Steele, it would have to be, 20 years ago. And then I'd have to think, what was life like 20 years ago? I mean, did we even have the internet then? I can't remember. So I think it would take a lot of thought. But yeah, possibly. I mean, it's something that I vaguely thought about, but have not felt inspired to do yet. But maybe I would, and it would be quite fun in a way, wouldn't it, to see what she was like, and then think, but we know you didn't do that. We know what actually happened to you. So I've always imagined her as having been determined to become a police officer from an early age. But how far back would I go? I wouldn't write about her as a child, I don't suppose. So I'm not sure, really. I'd have to be consistent with what I've done with her already. And it would be a challenge.
Maybe is it Linda LaPlante who did one where her main character was in her first year of being a police person, maybe her first years or something.
I do a lot of research into what was it actually like being in the police force 20 odd years ago. That in itself would be, I think, relatively easy to find out. But I mean, it's an interesting idea, actually, isn't it? Making it that as well. So I've got to do another dystopian. I've got to do another psychological standalone, and I've got to do a prequel for Geraldine. Yeah, okay.
Got a list. Someone on here, someone that they come up as Facebook user, as you can see, asks if the Steele books got adapted for TV, who would you like to see play Geraldine?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we did have the TV rights were optioned a couple of times, and we got very close, but unfortunately, the funding was not forthcoming, which I think is the hurdle at which a lot of these projects fail. So, do you want an honest answer to this? I would want, well, okay, I wouldn't want someone who didn't look like Geraldine. It would have to be somebody who's convincingly an intelligent woman. You think Helen Mirren as Jane Tennyson. You could believe she was a highly intelligent woman. So I'd want somebody who was convincingly very intelligent and a bit sort of harsh and aloof. But I would really love it if somebody who was a well-known popular actor played the role, because then the series, might really take off. But I mean, there's a lot of content. If any TV producers who have got a huge budget and are looking for content is interested in a crime series, 15 books out there. There's a lot of stories, a lot of content. So yeah, please do get in touch with my publisher. But I can't name any particular actress.
There's more options now for people to adapt stuff as well, isn't there? Because like streaming services and things that will make.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I think if honestly, if Geraldine Steele was going to be televised, it would have probably happened by now. But who knows? Sometimes these things are forever in the pipeline, aren't they? I couldn't see Geraldine Steele on the big screen, but I certainly could see it adapted for television very easily, because it's quite episodic. And anybody out there listening?
Do you have an end in sight for the series? Do you know what's going to happen to her?
Well, I have ideas, but sometimes the ideas change. And sometimes I think, I'm just going to kill her off. But, I've got another 3 books to write, so I can't kill her off yet. Maybe I should kill Ian. That would be a bit of a shock. It's very difficult to remain consistent and yet not become predictable. So I think the focus probably in the next few books is going to be more on the investigations rather than on Geraldine and Ian. I don't like books where something totally unpredictable happens that is just implausible. I like to say within the realms of plausibility, as far as writing a book will allow. And I don't want to become predictable. So I don't know. I need to think of something that readers are going to think, didn't see that coming, but will actually accept as credible within the world of the book. But the actual ending, I did have an ending in mind, but I think I've already moved beyond that. So I don't know, really.
Is there a little bit of you in any of the characters?
Well, I think there's quite a lot of me and Geraldine. Yeah. I mean, I'm absolutely kind of passionate about justice. And one of the things that really annoys me is when things are unfair. And I think that finds its expression in Geraldine, in her rigorous pursuit of justice. I like things to be fair. And of course, in life, they're not, are they? Nothing's fair, really. And outcomes are not always what we want them to be. And I think that's one of the appeals of crime fiction, that we can have some sort of resolution out of the chaos that occurs in a book. She's very task orientated. She's very focused on her work. She's not great at having friendships and being chatty with people. And I'm quite introverted and not that sociable, really. And so, yes, I think, people have said to me that, Geraldine is a bit of a loner and a bit odd. And she'd seemed perfectly normal to me. So I don't know, what does that tell you about her, about what of me is in my characters? So I don't know, really. Again, I mean, people have asked me, how do I get inside the mind of a killer? And there are areas that I'd rather not think about too closely, really. I don't know how I get there. I don't know. I just write and see what happens, really. And as I say, I try not to analyze it all too deeply. I think it might ruin the magic of it somehow for me.
Are there topics you wouldn't write about?
Yes. Yes, I would never kill a child in one of my books because I have children. I have a granddaughter, and that's not a place I would want to go to in my head. And when you're writing these books, you do have to some extent, go into dark places in your mind. And so I wouldn't. My books are not graphic unless I feel the story needs it. And of course, the killers have to be pretty nasty characters very often. And I think for me, it would be a mistake to try and kind of gloss over the violence. I think what happens in any sort of violent act is horrific and dreadful, and we should be shocked. We should be horrified when one person behaves violently towards another person. So I am shocked by these things, and I think that comes out in the writing, that murder is shocking. It should be absolutely shocking, but violence doesn't inspire me. I'm not inspired by blood and guts. One of my books does have quite a lot of blood and guts because the story requires it. But other than that, I've forgotten what the question was now.
Is there things you wouldn't write about?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't kill a child in one of my books. I wouldn't torture anybody unless it was absolutely necessary to establish that this character is a complete sadist and will cause other people pain without caring about it. Because to some extent, you have to make your killers and your baddies bad, don't you? My first book, Cut Short, some people criticized it because they said the killer wasn't evil enough. And actually, he's, in some ways, the killer is as much a victim as people he kills, because he's a character who shouldn't be out unsupervised in society. He's, a very sad and sick character. But the more evil your killer is, the more invested your readers are in them getting caught. I mean, it's basically goodies and baddies, isn't it? And if your baddie is actually quite nice, well, then the tension is not quite so severe, is it? So I do include sort of nasty details. I don't write cozy crime, but I'm not inspired by all the blood and guts and violence. And I wouldn't go there just for its own sake. And as I say, I wouldn't harm a child, which is probably a bit of a spoiler in some of my books, but there you go. Other than that, yeah, probably almost anywhere I would go if the story needed it.
There's a few more questions. Do you write in silence or have music playing in the background?
Okay, there are two things I cannot screen out when I'm writing. One is music, and the other is the sound of my husband's voice. It's the most ridiculous thing, but he can be listening to the radio fine, and then he'll say something, and I'll just be quiet. I'm trying to concentrate. And leaf blowers annoy me as well, so they're quite difficult to screen out. But I find music difficult to screen out. I can't write when there's music playing because I'll be listening to the music. But I can write if there's a buzz of conversation going on, if the television's on in the background. I think Isaac Asimov used to write in busy places because he felt inspired by the buzz and liveliness of conversation. So I don't need absolute silence, but then sometimes I do. It sort of varies. I don't really understand it, but sometimes I need silence to focus, and other times I find the silence itself can be distracting, and I might put the radio on. So it seems to vary, and I don't know why.
I think it's a teacher thing. I think teachers are used to noise, so you kind of need a bit of like background noise to work. Like silence just means something's going on. Someone on here has asked what authors have been an influence on your writing.
Oh, that's a difficult question. When I was a child, I used to read avidly all the time, and then I went to university and I spent 4 years studying literature, read all the time. I then ended up teaching English, so again, a lot of reading and literature. So my life has always been around books and fiction and stories. I just love stories. So I've actually read a lot, I guess, in my life, and I think it's impossible to say really which authors in particular have inspired me, um, because I think as writers, well, as a writer, one is a kind of gannet, and you pick up bits here, there, and everywhere. So I don't know, but I do think that I think the best advice that anyone has ever given to aspiring writers is when William Faulkner said, he said, read, 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 read everything. And then I'm going to paraphrase now. He said, you'll kind of get to know what works and what doesn't work. And then you write and you will know what's good and what isn't good in your own writing. He's basically saying you kind of hone your inner critic in a way by reading what other people have written. And I think, I mean, I mentioned earlier, I've never done any creative writing courses, but I think I inadvertently trained myself to write because I spent 40 years reading almost all the time. And I mean, not a day would go by when I wasn't doing some reading. So I'd done a lot of reading. And when I started writing, it just seemed, I wrote something that was like turning on a tap. So I think I've had all sorts of influences on me, and I'd hesitate to pick anybody out. I mean, if you ask me what authors do I enjoy, I could mention loads and loads of authors, and any day you ask me, I might mention somebody different. And there are so many more authors out there to explore. So any particular authors? I don't know. I couldn't say. I love reading. Well, actually, no. I mean, it depends, doesn't it? I think when you write a book, it's like you're taking your readers on a journey, and some journeys you just want to get to your destination, don't you? You just want to find out what's happened. You know, who done it? Agatha Christie. Who's the murderer? You just want to get to the end and find out. Some authors write so beautifully. I'm thinking Kazuo Ishiguro or Ian McEwan. Their prose is so lovely that you don't really want to get to the end of the journey, really. You're just enjoying the prose. Or Dickens, you know, some of his books are so humorous and entertaining. You're not desperate to get to the end to find out what happens. You're just enjoying reading as you go along. So if you ask me who's my favorite author, that would depend on the sort of mood that I was in and how I was feeling. Dylan Thomas. You don't read a Dylan Thomas short story to find out what happens in the end. You just enjoy the unbelievably brilliant prose, so lyrical. So whereas someone like Lee Child, or I'm reading a David Baldacci at the moment, and there, yeah, you want to find out what happens. You're curious. All these questions about what's going on, why is it happening? So I think we read different books for different purposes. I mean, poetry, I rarely read poetry. I find poetry quite difficult to understand, really. And I don't like reading things I don't understand because it just makes me feel stupid. But some poetry I would enjoy just because it's so beautiful, and then almost the meaning doesn't matter. I mean, T.S. Eliot, I've no idea what he means half the time, but it's so beautiful. It's almost like listening to music, isn't it? So I think reading some prose that's more lyrical is a different experience to reading, say, a crime thriller, where you want to find out what's happened and why.
Does that wide experience of reading and background, do you think, help you be a good judge for the new blood authors?
Yeah, I guess so. Yes, I think so. And it's quite interesting, actually, because I occasionally do critique for the Crime Writers Association, and I find it so easy now because I've gone through the editing process about 24 times. I've had 22 books published. 23 books now, I think, edited so far. So I can spot when I'm reading somebody else's work where they've kind of taken a wrong turning or not quite got something right. But it doesn't always feed through to my own writing. And when I get a manuscript back from the editor and she's pointed something out, I think, oh yeah, why didn't I see that? But it's very difficult to see it in your own writing. I can see it in other people's writing, but not always in my own. So it's essential, I think, to have a good editor. But yes, I think having read so much, and I think the more you read, the more it does hone your critical skills, really, because you know what works for you and what doesn't work. Of course, it might be different for everybody. Different books work for different people, and sometimes different books work at different times. I remember the first time I read Pride and Prejudice, I just didn't get it at all. I was too young. You know, what's this story all about? It's pretty boring. I read it again a few years later and absolutely loved it because it's just so witty and funny. And the same with Of Mice and Men. I remember the first time I read it, I just didn't really get it at all. And then the second time I read it, I was just in floods of tears because I was old enough by then to understand the emotion in the book and the characters and what was going on. So sometimes at different times in your life, different books strike you in different ways. It's very much an organic experience, isn't it, reading a book? You know, it's the triangle, isn't it? There's the author and the book, but there's also you, the reader, and the experience you bring to it makes it a different experience for everybody who reads it.
I have another Mice and Men block from English at school, I think.
Oh my god! And I was trying not to cry at the end, and all these teenage boys just sitting there going, "What's going on?" And don't cry in front of them.
So you've done historical, dystopian, all the amazing crime novels. What is there any other genre that you haven't tried yet that you'd like to have a go at?
A bestseller? No, I'm joking. Yeah, I have written a humorous novel, but like I say, that will never see the light of day because it's too silly. Another genre that I'd like to have a go at. Not really. I mean, I think it's more, for me, it's not about the genre, it's just about the story. And I think, you know, I'll have an idea for a story and then suddenly the characters are kind of there and I want to explore them. And no, I mean, I never thought I would write a crime novel until one day I had an idea and started writing, and it, you know, just wrote itself out as a crime novel. And I never thought I'd write a historical novel. I never thought I'd write a dystopian novel. So I think it's more a question of there's a story and there's a character, and then off I go. I think, yeah, you were asking earlier about influences. I think my dystopian fiction was a little bit influenced by Margaret Atwood, more than I realised, because I read Handmaid's Tale quite a long time ago. And then recently we watched it on television. And certainly the first series was very, very close to the book. And watching on television reminded me about the book. And then I thought, oh yeah, I think that's influenced my dystopian novel a little bit. But I think there are so many different influences that come to bear on writing a book. And it's, I mean, my book is very different to The Handmaid's Tale. But as I say, it was obviously a bit of an influence. And it's all these different influences that kind of meld together and you come up with something different. So
she's got another amazing dystopian sort of trilogy that's like After Me Comes the Flood and Oryx and Crake. They're absolutely lovely.
Some books just kind of stand out, don't they? Or Children of Men by Doris Lessing as well. There are sometimes books that just stand out, aren't there? I think the early science fiction as well, H.G. Wells and John Wyndham is one of my favourites, I think, really, of science fiction. And I also got really into the Dune trilogy. Is it a trilogy? The Dune series at one point. Although I'm not really a great one for science fiction, but sometimes you come across something and it just captures you, doesn't it?
There's a question here that says, will you ever write a novella?
A novella is what, about 40,000 words? And well, I've tried writing short stories actually, but I'm not very good at it. And my publisher asked me to write a short story just for fun, a bit of a silly one for Christmas about Geraldine Steele. I can't remember how many words that is. It's called Killer Christmas or something. Actually, that's quite appropriate now, isn't it? Maybe I should start tweeting about that or something. That's pretty short, and it was good fun to write. But I found it a bit difficult because I wanted to, I'm so used to writing novels. I could see where I needed to develop it. Oh no, I haven't got that many words. So, but yes, I mean, I'd be happy to write a novella if I have an idea. I mean, it may be that the dystopian novel I'm writing at the moment is really going to be more of a novella because I've written about 35,000 words, but I can already see how it's going to end. And I'm thinking, well, really, shall I spend the time developing this into a full-length novel? Or have I written it out and I'll move on to something else? I don't know. I have to get back to Geraldine Steele soon as well. So, yeah, quite possibly. I don't know is the answer.
Would you write about the current lockdown situation, or do you think you'd avoid it altogether?
No, well, at the moment, I'm avoiding it altogether and planning to avoid it altogether because for me, although it sounds funny because I write crime novel and people get killed, but for me, fiction is an escape from reality, and I don't want to think about and it's kind of a bit boring in a way, isn't it? Lockdown, we're just all stuck home, aren't we? And yes, I can see there could be ideas for a brilliant crime novel that happens in lockdown because by the time we come out of it, a year's gone by and somebody's just disappeared, and they, whoever lives with them says, "Oh yeah, they went off or something," and nobody can even really remember who they were, and actually they're buried in the garden or something. But no, I don't really want to think about lockdown too much. I want to move out into a different world. I recently reread, as a kind of comfort read, really. I reread, which one was it? The Magician's Nephew. Did you ever get into the Narnia books? I loved it as a child, and I loved it again. But The Magician's Nephew is the book where the children end up in the wood between the worlds, and there are just hundreds of ponds that they jump into, but they take them into a different world. They're like portals into a different world. And I didn't realize when I read it as a child, but I realize now that what C.S. Lewis was writing about was imagination. And I feel in a way, more so now during lockdown, that being here in my real life during lockdown, I'm just in the wood between the worlds, and I want to step into somebody else's world reading a book, or I want to step back into Geraldine Steele's world by writing one of her books, or step into a different world. And life does seem to be in a lot of ways very much on hold, doesn't it? So I'm not sure that I would really be inspired to write a book during lockdown, even if I wanted to, which I don't. But that said, I might have an idea tomorrow and write a book set during lockdown. So I don't know.
We've got 2 minutes left. Do you want to give everyone a reminder of yourself, all your series is?
What can I say? I write the Geraldine Steele series. My name is Leigh Russell. 2 S's, 2 L's, and Steele doesn't have an E on the end. I mean, all the names that I've chosen get misspelled all the time. Why did I call my psychic Ian Peterson? Everybody calls him Ian Patterson. And my publisher's called Ian. I mean, I didn't really think this through properly when I started. But anyway, I write the Geraldine Steele series. The 15th book in this series is coming out in January. We've sold well over 1 million books in the series. And as Howard Linsky said, 1 million readers can't be wrong. So if you enjoy crime fiction and like a good murder story, then you might want to try the series. The first in the series is called Cut Short. And I've written various other things, standalones, dystopian. So I think if anything I have said has interested you at all and you don't know my work, then perhaps just look at my website, leighrussell.co.uk, or look me up on Amazon. My books are constantly being put on offer on Kindle, and just have a look and see if there's anything that takes your fancy. I can't sort of recommend any particular book, just have a look and see if you like the look of something. And if you are already, as many people are, following the series and a fan of Geraldine Steele, then Evil Impulse is out in January, and the following book, the 16th, will be out in I think August next year. That one is currently called GS16 because it doesn't have a title yet. So we just call it GS15, GS16. And then just before the book is published, oh God, we've got to find a title. What's so difficult finding a title? And I like to be original with my titles. I don't like to use titles that have been used before. It's almost impossible to think of something that works that hasn't been used before. You know, anything you think of, somebody else has done it. Yeah, that's who I am. I'm a writer, and if you are an aspiring writer and you have any questions, you can always get in touch with me via my website. I'm very open to questions and interaction. If you have any brilliant ideas for another book, let me know. And I can't think what else to say, really. I'm just, busy writing, and it's great.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. And, do ask me back in January slot so that I can tell you all about the new book that's out, or in April with my dystopian book. Or, oh no, this is Crime Book Club, isn't it? So it's got to be Geraldine. So January.
Doesn't have to be.
I've got Geraldine's out. Or at any time, there's likely to be another Geraldine out soon. So anyway, have a really, really good Christmas, everybody. Read lots and lots of books. Go to the bookshops when they're open again. Whatever you do, please buy my books or borrow them from the libraries when they're open again, because I need my books to keep selling so that I can carry on writing full time.